Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree. Today is going to be a different type of console wars video because we're not actually talking about a console per se. We're talking about computers or PC gaming. Now, PC gaming has intersected with console gaming pretty much since the beginning of time, or at least relative to computer games. But modern PC gaming specifically refers to Windows based gaming, usually Steam or Origin or GOG, but running on Windows. PC meaning your Windows computer or personal computer. But previously, PC was shorthand for any personal computer. So this would refer to Commodore 64, the Apple II family, the Atari 8-bit and ST family, the Amiga line, etc. So PC gaming, as it's known, has sort of existed side by side with console gaming from the beginning, but diverged rather quickly. Now, companies that made video games that were ported to home consoles, usually they were made for arcades, did port the more popular arcade games to computers as well, which they still do today, even though they don't make them in arcades anymore. They pretty much make them for the home console, which is usually PlayStation and Xbox, and then port them to the PC. So that type of game still exists. But then you have games that are made for PC to take advantage of the unique PC hardware, as well as sitting at a computer screen at a desk, with a mouse and keyboard, or even just a keyboard and joystick, because there were no mice back in the day, because we didn't have Jewies back in the day. So, yeah. Some of your early PC home computer platforms would be the Atari 8-bit platforms, which would be the 400, the 800, and the 1600, and then the Atari ST line. Then you also had the Commodore line, which was the VIC-20, the PET or PET, and the Commodore 64 / Commodore 128. And then you also had the IBM PC line and its clones, which would be DOS, 286, 386, etc., etc. And then on the Apple side, you had the Apple II line, but you also had the Macintosh and later iMac and Mac OS. And then you also had in the 90s, you had the Atari Falcon. And starting in the 80s and carrying over into the 90s, you had the Amiga line, which were made for gaming. Everything pretty much converged in 1995 when all of the other players either went out of business or exited the hardware entirely for whatever reason. And we were just left with Windows 95 and a very struggling Apple for a period of time. What we think of today as PC gaming really developed and came into its own scene in the 90s with Interplay and id Software and other companies like them that were doing random things like Doom and Wolfenstein and Jazz Jackrabbit and Alone in the Dark and You Don't Know Jack and shit like that. PC gaming was really becoming a thing in the 90s. And then after DirectX came on the scene with Windows 95, everything kind of converged onto DirectX. And then that being the namesake of the Xbox, it was originally DirectX Box, and then Microsoft just dropped, for marketing purposes, just called it the Xbox. And originally, Xbox games were compatible with DirectX, so they could run on Windows computers, but it was complicated and messy. Anyways, The original Xbox is literally just a PC stuck in a box. Now, aside from that, you've also had attempts by various companies to try to bring PC gaming to the console space, the living room. This was done in the 80s with things like the XEGS and the Commodore 64 game system. In the 90s, you had the Amiga CD32. A few years ago, you had the failed Ouya. You had the Apple Pippin. And most recently, you have the Steambox and other variants like it. Computer machines that are trying to emulate console gameplay, but playing PC games, pretty much. Those machines tend to not be very successful historically compared to dedicated consoles or dedicated PCs, because they tend to be like, these weird little half-breed machines that aren't fully consoles, but also aren't fully computers. So, like, a lot of computer games aren't compatible with them, and a lot of console games aren't ported to them. So it's just like, who is it for? So PC games tend to be longer, more, I don't want to say in depth, but games you have to pay more attention to than console games. Console games tend to be quicker and more, like action based, whereas PC games, which can be action based, tend to be more story based by and large, or like focused on a thing, like strategy games, or simulation type games, or point and click adventure type games. By and large, they tend to be more interactive than console games. Like I said, by and large, there's some overlap between everything, as there will always be. But your popular PC genres are your point and click adventure, your first person shooter. You've got the turn based and real time strategy game, and you got Sims. Sims are real popular on PCs. Sims would be things like Sim City, Sim Earth, Theme Park, um, um, Roller Coaster Tycoon, The Sims, things like that. Now, really starting with the PS2 Xbox generation, first person shooters became prominent on home consoles as well. But they had previously been pretty much exclusive to PCs, with a handful of exceptions that were usually not great. The one standout would be the 1997 first person shooter by Rareware called GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64, which was a standout at the time. Beyond that, most first person shooters didn't even bother coming to home consoles. Now, computers, by and large, have a few inherent advantages over consoles just by their nature. One, you tend to have better storage capabilities on a computer than you do a home console. Now, that's somewhat negated by modern home consoles having access to USB hard drives and expanded internal hard drives. But historically speaking, consoles had a limited storage space on the medium, cartridge, disc, CD, whatever, and usually no storage space on the unit itself until like more recently. Whereas computers have always had a limited amount of storage internally and have always had expanded storage hard drives, tape drives, floppy disks, etc. Pretty much from the beginning. Another advantage PCs have over consoles is they're customizable. You can upgrade your PC to an extent, more or less indefinitely, to an extent, but it gets more complicated as time goes on. But you could still play, you could still run games on a Windows 95 Intel Pentium 1 computer if you wanted to. With Bluetooth support and a Blu-ray player. Blu-ray drive. Yeah, you could do that. Now, the downside to PCs over consoles is, by and large, gaming PCs tend to be incredibly expensive compared to their console counterparts, as well as obsolete really quickly, so you're having to constantly upgrade them, whereas with the console, they don't tend to be obsolete the day you buy it, whereas with the PC, it's pretty much understood. As soon as you take it home from the store, it's already obsolete. So PC gaming tends to appeal to a type of gamer that likes to tinker with their stuff, that like to customize their hardware, and they like to mod and customize their games, because modding is real big on PCs, where it's next to impossible on consoles for the most part. And a lot of experimental games get started out on the PC, and if they're successful enough and have enough mass appeal, can get ported to the consoles if there's a way to do so effectively. There always isn't, so sometimes those games don't make their way to consoles. Now, as someone who currently prefers consoles over PCs, just because I'm old and I don't like to fiddle anymore, I just want to plug it in, turn it on, play a game. I have way more experience with PCs than I do consoles, contrary to what it seems, because I used to custom build my own home computers, and I used to tinker the fuck out of them. But I just don't have the brain capacity to keep up with modern technology and the money to keep up with the outrageous prices of graphics cards these days. So I just don't have the motivation to keep up with PC gaming like I did in the past. But yeah, PC gaming is still around, and it's still as popular as ever, more so than ever, in fact. And I would argue that as long as video games exist, and as long as humans exist going forward, PC gaming is going to be a thing. At least until we evolve to the point where we can actually live eternally inside the Matrix as a simulation, at which point it'll just be whatever we can imagine, I guess. So that's cool.